Welcome to Pigeon River Farm, doing farming right. I'm Robert Brown, the owner of Pigeon River Farm. Thank you for viewing. Well, good evening. In tonight's episode, we're going to talk about education. And what it takes to be successful in agriculture is ongoing training. Like many professions, it's ongoing training along with some formal education up front definitely helps. In my particular case here, the last years, well, really my whole entire life, I have been going for ongoing education. In a given year, I would normally put in about in person, excluding last year was a little limited because of COVID. But prior to that, and starting again this year, I'm anticipating to put in between 60 and 100 hours of classroom time. Yeah, that could be pasture walks all the way up to formal education. Just this year alone, I've gone to a number of excellent presentations, gained a lot of knowledge. And my encouragement to anybody else that is in the farming, agricultural, any support that we're thinking about food or making money in agriculture, you need the education. And there's so many facets. You know, in my case here, I'll kind of focus on what I've gone to recently on soil health. Natural soil health is quite a different beast than trying to deal with the chemical world. And the chemical world has its own education, so I'm not going to make light of that. I've attended a lot of that just to understand how it works, have a better appreciation. But my main focus is on regenerative farming. I've been at this for a number of years now in the regenerative model, and you need to understand all the tools and techniques that are needed. And tools and techniques take a little bit of effort, a little bit of money, a little bit of time. But all of that invested really can pay off for you. You know, our fields or pasture, I should say, are supercharged. Our high tunnels are working out real good. Livestock, I have very few problems. Health problems are really minor. Injury are it, pretty much. We don't really seem to have any problem with when it comes to any kind of disease. So we're looking great in that regards. So what I encourage everyone to do is consider getting education. There's UW system programs that are great. I've gone through a lot of that. A lot of different variety of private organizations. One of the big ones for me is Grassworks. As you can see, I'm a proud member of Grassworks. I've been very involved with them. It is an institution that has treated us very well. Then I've gone a lot of the private vendors support, Nature's Way Minerals. We've gone some great classes on that. Zone products. Zone, we use their fertilizer and biologicals, and it is so innovative. Just so amazingly well designed, and it's worked. And what I go to, and we get to learn both how we affect the micro, basically right down to the soil, down to the microbe in the soil, to the macro, looking at things like global warming, carbon sequestering, and the like. So we need to understand all of it and how to best work within our environment. So education is key to this. There's a lot of online, there's great YouTube and other companies provide great videos from farmers and educators of all type. Great way to get an education. I take advantage of every bit I can as time allots. Formal education, in other words, in a setting where you can interact, is much better. I do a number of webinars per year. They work out extremely well. A lot of them have been on livestock management through FACT. It's like a support industry that supports like animal welfare approved. So animal welfare approved, in fact, is a food alliance that looks at humane treatment of animals and try to produce the best product it can. They've got great seminars. So tonight I just put together kind of an entourage of videos that I was able to take at different events. Grassworks conference we have, that was kind of and there's a number of speakers that you'll have a chance to hear little excerpts of them. And then additionally, Nature's Way Minerals, Forage Council, that's here, a local one in Waupaca, Wisconsin, the county that I'm in. And then we had the zone meeting. So none of them are complete. I couldn't let this go on for hours. But these are all excerpts, just little chunks that I videoed. Most of them are very kind to let me actually run my video equipment there for day-to-day viewing, reviews, taking notes, putting together videos even. So I want you to really enjoy what you're going to see. It's going to take a little while. Enjoy it, and if you see anything you really like, I'll be more than happy to give you kind of the, I guess we'd say the Reader's Digest version, something that is the way I saw it. I can't distribute their materials, you can understand, but I've been through it. I've been through a lot of this, so if you find a subject area you'd like to learn more about, please message me, and I will put a video like that together.
Front of any news is the high price on fertilizer, and what are we going to do? How are we going to manage? The supply chain is broken and they're trying to fix, so there's a lot of unknowns in the future, and so we're going to talk a bit about what we do, knowing what we've done, and how to work into that.
And Lau, he's a professor at Ohio State University. The world's cultivated soils have lost between 50 and 70% of their original carbon stock, much of which has become atmospheric CO2. So we want, I'm not going to tell people how to farm, and this is my opinion that I formed over 35 years of feeding cows. There's a lot to be said for the loss of carbon from the soil, and when we open the soil and expose carbon, it mixes with oxygen and it floats off into the air. So between farming practices and feeding practices, over the course of my career, I've kind of put myself on a trajectory toward nothing more than being the carbon saver guy, and hopefully that helps the world before I go. So the question is, can we feed our world without Monsanto? And there's a lot of people, maybe a lot in this room, I don't know, that believe that we cannot do that. That if we don't increase production from our crops, we're not going to be able to feed 7 billion people. We're not going to be able to feed 9 billion people by 2050, and that's a discussion that probably won't get solved tonight. But you have to ask yourself, are we any closer to feeding ourselves now than we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
There are plants and fungi that can turn bare rock into soil. You think maybe there's some plants and fungi that can turn degraded soil into better soil? Absolutely. And that process, as I talked about earlier, depends on root exudates. This is the driving force, photosynthesis from a plant, and then changed into root exudates. I saw Will Winter selling refractometers so you can tell the Brix level in your plants. When you get the Brix level up in your plants, a lot of the sugar goes into the ground to feed microbes that increase soil organic matter and improve soil function. And the glomalin produced by mycorrhizal fungi, the root exudates, what I actually showed you, the root exudates going out of the root out in the soil, that's really not what we want. We want those root exudates going into mycorrhizal fungi. Because instead of being secreted at that little tip, it's secreted all the way on every surface of that. And on the surface of that mycorrhizal fungi, there will be bacteria. And those bacteria can do some truly amazing things. And then once you get all this root, this rhizosphere ecosystem going, you see all these, the dreadlocks here, the dreadlocks look, it's called a rhizosheath. All that soil that's stuck to those roots because of those root exudates, and the mycorrhizal fungi secreting all those glomalin, all those compounds that glue those soil particles to that root.
And I think it's important to have an idea of what that sequestration looks like, because there's a lot of variability in estimated sequestration rates. So I think it's helpful to be able to visualize that. And so the slow accumulation, or potentially slow accumulation of soil burden, emphasizes that older pastures are needed, given that the oldest pastures had the most carbon in this research. I think that's further supported by the fact that only the palm carbon less stable fraction, not the MAM carbon, was the one that seemed to be related to these different management parameters. And one of the reasons we might not have seen any responses in that mineral-associated organic matter is it's possible that maybe that MAM carbon has saturated. And so if you remember from this graph I showed you earlier, we can look at where this leveling off is occurring, and that's happening at about 5% soil organic carbon, which would be 10% soil organic matter. And nearly all of the soils in this research study had soil carbon values below that. And so we don't think, or it's probably not likely, that soil carbon saturation or MAM carbon saturation has occurred in these sites based on this estimate here. But this is research that's been done in European forest and grassland soils. And so it's possible that something I'd like to look into more to understand better what that saturation rate might be in Wisconsin specifically. And so I think that going back to these key takeaways, I think it's great to understand that there's these potential environmental benefits of having pastures, the potential to build soil carbon. I think it's important to understand that there can be flexibility in grazing management and this need for having pastures long term.
From 1910, 1900 over to 2000, well, say 2020, look at where we were at. Parts per million of all the different types of minerals, minerals that were in our soil that are no longer there. The parts per million nutrients and mineral composition of our soil. Look at how that's decreased. Okay, we talk a lot about minerals, but the other thing you're going to learn here tonight is it's not. Notice what it says: nutrients and mineral composition.
I got some bad news for you. Some of you didn't already know this. The free sulfur is getting ready to go down again. We've talked about this in the past, and I've had a little map thing I've showed on the sulfur thing. Sulfur, free sulfur out of the atmosphere has been decreasing over the past 20 years. We had changes in 2008 when they changed vehicles to the ultra-low sulfur. 2012, they changed equipment to low sulfur diesel, right? January 1st of 2020, all water-going vessels had to switch to ultra-low sulfur diesel. So, this trend that we've been seeing of sulfur levels in the atmosphere and the soils have been gradually going down. I was hoping, all right, we kind of hit the bottom, we're kind of coping with where we're at, but January 1st of this year, and actually some companies, we had already started the transition last June. So these sulfur levels has already been going down since last June. So expect further sulfur deficiencies in the soil and in plants to continue on, and maybe even getting worse. We talk about this thing with Tiger 90, Supercal SO4. That's one reason why I was talking about my decision of what I was going to do. I think I'm going to stay with the split applications because of this issue. Diesel's not cheap, and machinery's not cheap, but universities, you go to about any university, they've done testing on this, that if you make split applications of nitrogen, you can get by with way less nitrogen applied if we're doing it more often. If we split it up, don't put all your nitrogen, your supplemental nitrogen out at one time. I mean, all the tests that I've seen, the more often, if you once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times, 5 times you can get by total nitrogen, you can get by using a whole lot less nitrogen if you apply it in 5 different applications as one.
We
Okay?
then went on to do studies in utero, and we were finding the same thing. Exposed in utero to poor quality diet, the offspring not only eat more of the poor quality diet, they digest it better. So they have higher digestible dry matter intakes. The body is responding in ways that enable them to adapt to the situation. Next slide. And this is just one of many studies. Here's another example with in utero, where our friends and colleagues in Australia, where they have a lot of salt brush, they showed that lambs exposed to salt brush in utero grow faster, handle salt loads better than lambs from mothers on pasture. They excrete salt more rapidly, they drink less water, and they maintain higher intake when eating salt brush. In other words, they've changed morphologically and physiologically. Their kidneys have changed. They look at kidney form and function. These internal organs have changed to accommodate the diet. Next slide. I mentioned earlier, bitter brush as an appetizer helps the sagebrush to go down. Out in our part of the world, in the Great Basin, that whole area out in the western, northwestern U.S., sagebrush is a dominant plant. It's a major plant, and it's often not viewed as a forage resource, although in the talk I'll give this afternoon, I'll talk about the value that sagebrush can play. But at the U.S. Sheep Experiment Station years ago, they were wanting to see, are there sheep that can utilize more sagebrush than other sheep? And so they were using fecal analyses to identify sheep. And they were able to find that there's a subset of the sheep there at the station that ate a huge amount of sheep compared with the average sheep at the station. Everybody thought it was physiological until they started doing the studies on it, and we were doing studies at the same time on this same topic. And what they learned was that those sheep had figured out that if we eat some bitter brush, prior to eating sagebrush, we can eat a whale of a lot of sagebrush. So an appetizer of bitter brush, and the tannins in bitter brush and their interaction with the terpenes in sagebrush is setting that up. That was a learned pattern of behavior that became a part of the subculture of that herd. Go ahead.
Quality, and I want you to watch the blue and brown lines. Okay, the whole graph flipped, but also the brown line is now on top, it was on the bottom before, and the blue line, for the most part, is on the bottom where it used to be on the top. So that means the graze treatment actually, for most of the season, had the lowest forage quality, and that's in relative forage quality, which combines some different forage quality parameters together. And the bird treatment had consistently the highest forage quality over the course of the season. So what I want to kind of leave you with is that I kind of think that even though the milk yield model was conservative, that actually it may sort of have told the correct story, because if we're pairing the treatments that have the highest forage quantity with also having the lowest forage quality and vice versa, that maybe it's sort of all coming out of the wash, and that there are these subtle differences and trends among these treatments, but that they're going to kind of even out over the course of the season with the reduction in quantity paired with the increase in quality, if that makes sense. Kind of increase this diversity of habitat in a way, which is a good thing. And I also want to highlight that when we're thinking about habitat, we do need to always remember that we want to think about nest success as well. So while this disturbance creates habitat, the timing of that is really important.
So I thank you very much and have a great evening.